Hey guys, tonight we're going to drift slowly and quietly into the cold black stillness beyond our solar system, where something strange is still humming along through the dark. Picture this, out past Pluto, farther than any planet or planetoid, a tiny spacecraft no bigger than a small car is floating silently. It's been doing so for nearly 50 years. And strapped to its side, held in place like a forgotten postcard on a family fridge, is a golden vinyl record. Not just any record. This one has music, sounds, greetings, and yes, Beethoven. It's Voyager. And it's still out there. Still carrying the music of Earth. Still carrying Beethoven's Ninth Symphony into the unknown. Now, just to be clear, you're probably not going to survive this journey, not because it's dangerous, but because it's really, really boring. So wonderfully, blissfully boring that your eyelids may get a little heavier with every passing planet. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I always love seeing where and when people are tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You hover next to Voyager 1, far beyond the solar system's familiar glow. The stars aren't twinkling, they're staring, distant and blank, like a billion unblinking eyes. Voyager is drifting with purpose but no destination. There's no steering wheel. It doesn't even know where it's going. And tucked into its side is something unexpectedly human. A 12-inch, gold-plated copper record. It reflects a dull, honey-colored shimmer in the sunlight, or what little of it still reaches out here. It's bolted onto the spacecraft like a farewell note tucked into a suitcase. The record doesn't play itself, doesn't glow or sing on its own. But if someone, or something, found it, and figured it out, they'd hear what Earth sounds like. Among the greetings in 55 languages, the recordings of whales and babies crying, the percussion of thunder, the sound of footsteps and a heartbeat, is music. Carefully chosen music. One track, in particular, stands out. It's from Beethoven's Symphony No. 5, Movement 2. Not the famous da-da-da-dum one, but the quieter, slower part, the one that's more like a gentle pat on the back than a declaration of war. It's a moment of grace, floating through eternity. You imagine finding this disc as a being from another world. You have no ears, no language, no context. But still, there's something about it. A mathematical rhythm. A curve in the melody that says, someone cared enough to make this. Someone fragile, biological, warm. Back in the 1970s, people on Earth had begun to dream big. Not just send a machine to Mars, big. Not land on the moon, big. No, this was bigger. They asked, what if we could leave behind a message, not for someone we know, but for someone we'll never meet? This idea might sound charming. Or delusional. Or both. But to a few slightly sleep-deprived NASA engineers, it made perfect sense. If you're going to toss a space probe out of the solar system, why not tape a mix CD to it? Only it wasn't a CD. This was the 1970s, remember. Bell-bottom jeans. Rotary phones. Nobody had Google Translate. Disco was in full bloom. The idea of streaming anything was limited to water. And yet here we are, decades later, with this golden relic still drifting, and Beethoven, forever mid-note. You glide beside the spacecraft, its antennas still angled back toward Earth, faithfully pinging data home even as the light it reflects fades. The gold record is just an afterthought on the spacecraft's side, but to you, it's the soul of the mission. A time capsule, sure. But also a kind of cosmic whisper. The Voyager team knew the record probably wouldn't be found. The odds of any alien civilization intercepting it? Roughly the same as finding a working VCR in a lava flow. But still, they made it. They filled it with messages of peace. With math diagrams, anatomical drawings, music from Senegal, Peru, and Bach. And yes, Beethoven. Because somehow, when you're trying to explain Earth to someone who's never been here, Beethoven's as good a place to start as any. Historians still argue whether this record was meant for aliens or for our own species. Some future civilization, perhaps, that rediscovers it after we've long gone quiet. It doesn't matter. It exists. And now, drifting silently out past the heliopause, Voyager hums on. Its golden heart still intact. Still sending, even if no one's answering. You trail behind it like a ghost, just listening. It's 1977. You step into a world of bell-bottoms, polyester suits, and strange, almost dreamy optimism. The 1970s were the decade of wild space dreams, a time when humanity started to take seriously the idea of becoming a spacefaring civilization. It's also the era that launched the Voyager spacecraft into the great unknown, carrying not just scientific instruments, but also a message, one that was truly from the heart. But you're not here to talk about moon landings or Apollo missions, no. You're standing in a small, windowless office at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California, where a group of engineers and scientists is sitting around, trying to figure out how to send a message that might last, well, forever. And here's the thing, they didn't just want to send a hello message, a basic, how's it going, fellow space dwellers. No, they were thinking bigger. Something that could represent humanity in all its glory, its weirdness, and, perhaps most importantly, its creativity. NASA had already had success with previous space missions that sent scientific data back to Earth. But this time, they were sending something with meaning. The Voyager Golden Record wasn't about facts or figures or charts, it was about humanity's soul. It wasn't just some random collection of things. The team pored over every single detail of this golden disk, from the sounds it would carry to the image it would present of life on Earth. The Voyager team, led by the legendary Carl Sagan, was trying to distill human existence down to its most meaningful, most universal aspects. And that meant music. Now, if you think that was an easy decision, well, you'd be wrong. Music, in particular, Western classical music, was an obvious choice for the engineers. They wanted something that would stand the test of time, something that could transcend all cultures, all languages. But, oh boy, did that open a can of worms. You watch as the room fills with tension. Sagan, a passionate champion of music's universal power, starts pushing for Beethoven, Ludwig van Beethoven, to be included. Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, especially the triumphant Ode to Joy, was an iconic piece, a symbol of human spirit, unity, and triumph. Who could resist it? But not everyone agrees. Some of the team members are skeptical. Is it too Western, they ask. Is this really the sound of humanity? Some suggested jazz, or even rock and roll, something more representative of the 20th century. What if this was our language, and we needed something that truly captured the essence of who we were, right now? Historians still argue whether including Beethoven was the right move. Was it an overly Eurocentric choice, or did it, in fact, perfectly represent the timeless nature of human emotion? You might wonder if Beethoven himself would have appreciated the irony. His music, which once revolutionized classical symphonies, now traveling out into the void of space, centuries after he had long since departed. While some wanted music that was distinctly of its time, others argued that the goal was to select something that would endure, not just for a few decades, but for centuries, or perhaps millennia. In the end, the record was packed with works from across different genres and time periods: Bach, Stravinsky, Blind Willie Johnson's Dark Was the Night, Cold Was the Ground, and yes, Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. The idea wasn't to create the ultimate playlist, but to tell a story, humanity's story, in just a few minutes of sound. Beethoven's Ninth was an unusual choice, but it wasn't just about melody. It was about emotion. And while Beethoven's music is grounded in European classical traditions, the emotions it evokes, joy, struggle, triumph, sorrow, are universal. That was the key. They weren't just trying to represent the Western world. They were trying to represent the human experience. And what better way to convey that than with a piece of music that can make you feel something deep inside, even if you don't understand the language? The decision was made. Beethoven would be included. But it wasn't just his music they'd be sending, it was a message. His music, chosen with intention, would be the representative voice of Earth. And in the most beacon-like way possible, the final movement of his Ninth Symphony, the Ode to Joy, would float out into the cosmos, forever. The record wasn't just about science. It was about symbolism. And the choice to include Beethoven was symbolic in a profound way. To the Voyager team, the inclusion of this piece of music was a statement about the power of art and creativity. It was a reminder that, while we may be tiny in the grand scheme of the universe, our ideas, our emotions, our art, those were the things that could survive long after we were gone. Imagine that, Beethoven's music, sent off to the universe, outlasting the very species that created it. This was the true purpose of Voyager. Sure, it was a scientific mission, gathering data about the outer planets. But its secondary mission, the one that lives on today, is one of cultural immortality. A record that says, this is who we were. This is who we are. And this is what we hope the universe will understand about us. You're still drifting beside Voyager, silently watching the gold disk shimmer ever so faintly under the distant light of the sun, which now looks more like an especially shy star than a source of life. It's peaceful here. Quiet in the kind of way only deep space can be. But you can't help asking yourself, why send anything at all? Let's rewind, again, to Earth, 1977. You float into a NASA conference room where the Voyager mission team is huddled around a battered coffee machine, exhausted but excited. Two spacecraft, Voyager 1 and Voyager 2, are being prepared for launch, destined to fly past Jupiter, Saturn, and possibly, if all goes well, even more distant planets. But someone raises a question, innocent at first, a little dreamy. What if we added something, just for the aliens? Now, you might imagine this suggestion would be laughed off. Surely NASA isn't in the business of space pen pals. But no one laughed. In fact, someone else added, we could include greetings. Pictures. Maybe music. And suddenly, this little idea began to grow roots. Before long, Carl Sagan was brought in to chair a small committee, and the race was on. If Earth was going to say hello to the universe, what exactly would it say? At this point, you might be asking, was this a scientific decision? Or something fluffier? Surprisingly, it was both. The Voyager mission itself was an unrepeatable opportunity. Thanks to a once-in-176-year alignment of the outer planets, the spacecraft could slingshot past multiple worlds using gravitational assists, like a cosmic pinball machine. The odds of having 2 spacecraft leave the solar system within human lifetimes? Astronomical. So the team figured, why not go for it? Why not include something that represents humanity, in case, someday, someone or something finds it? But what do you even say to aliens? That question haunted the committee. They didn't want to speak for just America. Or even just Earth in the 1970s. They wanted to speak for all of humanity, across time and culture. And that's where things got tricky. Historians still argue whether this impulse was noble or naive. Some say it was a bold act of hope, an embrace of our shared humanity across borders and generations. Others say it was arrogant, assuming anyone, or anything, would ever care. Still others point out that any alien civilization capable of finding Voyager is likely so advanced that they'd view our golden disk the way we'd view a cassette tape written in ancient Sumerian. Which is to say, with a mix of curiosity and total confusion. Yet there's something deeply human about the act. You don't send a message because you know it will be received. You send it because you hope it might be. That's why Voyager's golden record isn't just a scientific add-on. It's a declaration. A bottle tossed into the cosmic ocean, not because we expect a reply, but because we need to know we tried. You imagine being part of that decision-making process. Would you vote to include photos of DNA? Of a pregnant woman? A photo of a fish market in Japan, or a sunset over the Sahara? Would you include the laughter of a baby? A kiss? One quirky debate at the time centered around a certain anatomical diagram. The original plan included a photograph of a nude man and woman, meant to show human anatomy in a neutral, non-sexual context. But that plan was scrapped at the last minute due to concerns it would be too controversial for some audiences, not alien ones, mind you, but human ones. So instead, they chose silhouettes. Yes, really. You float back to Voyager, now understanding that everything on that record was chosen under time pressure, human bias, and a lot of coffee. Yet despite those imperfections, or maybe because of them, it feels authentic. Genuine. The record wasn't made to impress gods. It was made to introduce us, to whoever, or whatever, might care to listen. And why a record? Not a USB stick, not a laser-etched diamond disc. Well, remember, it was the 1970s. Analog technology was the standard. The team needed a format that would last a long time, and we're talking millions of years here, and could be played by beings with no knowledge of human technology. A vinyl-like record was about as straightforward and durable as it got. Plus, gold doesn't corrode. That's how we ended up with a phonograph disc, electroplated with gold, etched with instructions on how to play it, including images in binary code and a drawing of how to build a stylus. If the aliens can decode all that, honestly, they deserve a listen. You imagine, again, what it's like to discover this disc drifting through the cosmos. No context. No translation. Just the slow, deliberate grooves of music, footsteps, wind, and greetings from beings who once lived on a small blue planet. And somewhere in the middle of it all, Beethoven plays. Now that you know why we sent a message into the void, it's time to crack open the thing itself. The golden record. You float up next to it like a curious alien yourself, squinting at the strange diagrams on the cover. They're meant to show you how to play it, sort of a cosmic IKEA manual, but with less furniture and more existential pressure. Let's take a slow-motion dive through the contents of this very unusual mixtape. First up, 115 images. They're encoded in analog, not digital, which means the aliens would need to decode them line by line using the provided instructions. You'd see pictures of people eating, dancing, giving birth, well, tastefully cropped, and even licking an ice cream cone. Because if there's anything aliens really need to understand, it's dairy. Then come the sounds of Earth. You listen as a baby cries, a dog barks, thunder rumbles in the distance, and the surf crashes against a rocky beach. It's not dramatic, just real. You hear a kiss, a heartbeat, a blacksmith's hammer tapping metal. A coded symphony of ordinary life. And then, of course, there are the greetings, spoken in 55 different human languages, from ancient Akkadian to Wu Chinese. Each one, short and sweet. Some are formal. Some are poetic. One, from the Amoy dialect, simply says, "Friends of space, how are you all? Have you eaten yet? Come visit us if you have time." It's wildly charming. Even you want to visit Earth now, and you're already here. Historians still argue whether the greetings are helpful or just clutter. Would an alien species understand any of it? Or would it sound like a flock of ducks quacking politely? Still, the greetings do show one consistent trait: humans love to say hello. But of all the contents on the golden record, the music is where things get serious. The committee had to choose just 27 tracks, spanning the entire known history of music across cultures. A hard task, considering that Spotify's Chill Vibes playlist alone contains more than 100. They included everything from Senegalese percussion to a Navajo night chant, from Chinese Gucci music to a Bach fugue. But perhaps the most haunting selection is Blind Willie Johnson's "Dark Was the Night, Cold Was the Ground." It's a wordless blues song, just Johnson's slide guitar and moaning voice echoing with loneliness. Raw, ghostly. Painfully human. But then, there's Beethoven. 2 selections. One from the String Quartet No. 13 in B-flat major, gentle, reflective. The other, a moment from his Fifth Symphony, slow and steady, like a heartbeat stretched out in time. It's not the booming opening you'd expect. No, dun 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 dun. Just the more contemplative second movement, elegant, quietly optimistic. Why this piece? You imagine the committee debating that very question over lukewarm coffee. One member argues that the Fifth Symphony is too cliché. Another says it's essential. It's the most recognized motif in the universe, someone jokes. But then someone else counters, aliens don't know the cliché. For them, it's just sound. They settle on a version that shows Beethoven's quieter brilliance. Less thunder. More thought. More heart. And here's something quirky: one of the tracks originally submitted for inclusion was the Beatles' "Here Comes the Sun." But EMI, the music publisher, said no. Yep. The Beatles almost made it to interstellar space, but got rejected by copyright. So instead, we sent Bach. Beethoven. Bulgarian folk songs. And a 2,500-year-old wedding song from ancient Greece that's barely more than a whisper on the wind. As you listen through the selections, it dawns on you that this isn't just a playlist. It's a musical diary. A carefully chosen mosaic of joy, sorrow, ritual, rhythm, silence. Humanity, carved into vinyl and wrapped in gold. At one point, you wonder if the record should have included something from nature, a whale's song or a rainforest melody as music. But actually, those are on the sound section of the disc. Whales do get their own feature, as they should. They're basically underwater sopranos with more grace than half the opera singers on Earth. The musical section closes gently, drifting out like a breath held a second too long. No dramatic climax. No booming finale. Just sound, ending. Leaving space for silence. And in that silence, you realize something strange. This record doesn't really speak to aliens. It speaks to us. It tells us who we thought we were at the time. What we valued. What we feared. What we hoped might be remembered. If a being ever plays the disc, they won't just hear Earth's music, they'll hear Earth's longing. Its need to be known. Even if only by the stars. Section 5. You're back in that NASA meeting room, perched like a fly on the beige wall as the record committee squints at an impossibly long list of musical candidates. Classical. Folk. Jazz. Ritual chant. At least 3 people have fallen asleep with pencils in their hands. One engineer is quietly humming to himself. And now, it's time for the hard question, should we include Beethoven's Ode to Joy? On paper, it makes perfect sense. The Ode to Joy chorus, the grand finale of Beethoven's Symphony No. 9, is arguably one of the most transcendent, unifying musical moments ever composed. Big. Universal. No lyrics needed. Just joy in full surround sound. But in that room, nothing is that simple. Someone raises a concern, is this too Western? Another sighs, is joy the right message, or does it sound like we're trying too hard? Carl Sagan, always the philosopher, leans back and says, we're not just sending the facts of who we are, we're sending the best of who we are. It's hard to argue with that. But others press back. What if the aliens don't even understand melody the way we do? What if they perceive sound in shapes, or through chemical pulses, or, as one exhausted physicist suggests, taste? Still, Beethoven won't budge. He stays on the short list. Historians still argue whether Ode to Joy would have worked better than the quieter Beethoven piece that was ultimately chosen. Some say the record needed an emotional climax, something triumphant. Others insist that subtlety was better, that a soft gesture of beauty was more likely to be understood than a full-blown orchestral shout. For a while, the discussion detours into the potential downsides of emotional music. One person says, what if aliens think we're shouting at them? Another counters, maybe they'll be impressed we figured out harmony. You imagine an alien hearing Ode to Joy for the first time. No context. No language. Just waves of sound growing louder, bolder, more jubilant. Would they understand it as joy? Or would they think we were under attack by brass instruments? You drift out of the meeting and back into deep space. The golden record spins slowly, catching a little sunlight before it dims into starlight again. And you picture Beethoven, stoic, deaf, intense, sitting in a small apartment in 1824 Vienna, scribbling furiously into a score, absolutely unaware that his work would one day be bolted to a robot and launched toward Alpha Centauri. He never heard his ninth performed, at least not in the literal sense. By the time he conducted it, he was profoundly deaf. He had to watch the orchestra for cues, relying on the vibrations of the floor and the shifting of the musicians' bodies to keep time. And now here it is, possibly still vibrating, across billions of miles. There's something hauntingly fitting about that. A man who couldn't hear, writing music to be played in the vacuum of space, where there is no air and therefore no sound. The universe is silent. But the idea of the music carries on. Like a song stuck in your head that no one else can hear. You remember how the record includes that gentle second movement of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, not the Ninth's Ode to Joy. And yet, both pieces circle the same emotional core, the yearning for something larger. Something meaningful. Maybe that's why the team eventually chose the Fifth. Its quiet momentum. Its steady, almost meditative rhythm. It doesn't shout. It just continues, like Voyager itself. Forward, patient, undemanding. But the Ode to Joy still lingers as the great what if. What if it had been included? What message would that have sent? One of unity? Celebration? Or confusion? You float beside Voyager and imagine some far-off species discovering the golden disk, decoding it bit by bit, and finally reaching the section labeled music. They flip through the Bach, the gamelan, the panpipes. And then, suddenly, Beethoven. They have no ears. But they have something. Sensors, membranes, quivering electro-whiskers. They feel the music, somehow. Maybe they don't know the word joy, but they know movement. Rising. Bursting. Repeating. That unmistakable swell of feeling. And even if they don't feel anything at all, maybe they just recognize this, someone made this. Someone cared enough to send beauty. The committee might have argued, but in the end, they agreed on one thing. The point wasn't to represent all music perfectly. That's impossible. The point was to send something true. And Beethoven, whether in a gentle string quartet or a triumphant choral finale, is deeply, stubbornly true. He's flawed. Intense. Unapologetically emotional. And somehow, through sheer force of will, he built music that outlasted not just his hearing, but his body, his century, his world. Now his notes are sailing through interstellar space, packed onto a golden disk the size of a dinner plate. And you're here, floating along behind it, letting the last echo of the Ode to Joy fade into the dark. You drift farther now, Voyager still faintly pulsing ahead like a determined firefly, and it's time to turn the telescope inward, not toward space, but toward the composer himself, Ludwig van Beethoven, the man whose music now orbits the stars. You might know Beethoven as the guy with the wild hair and serious eyebrows, forever glaring in portraits like he just heard someone mispronounce concerto. But he was much more than that. He was a living paradox, bold and brooding, playful and tortured, a social misfit who could charm entire rooms with his music but rarely kept friends for long. Born in 1770 in Bonn, Germany, Ludwig was a child prodigy trained, rather harshly, by his father, who may or may not have subscribed to the "your misery is my motivational strategy" school of parenting. You begin to sense that Beethoven's lifelong battle wasn't just with silence, it was with the very shape of his emotions. As a young man, Beethoven moved to Vienna, where he made his name not only as a virtuoso pianist but also as an unpredictable dinner guest. He was known for his terrible manners, love of strong coffee, reportedly 60 beans per cup, and erratic bursts of temper. You get the feeling that if social media had existed, he'd have been subtweeting Mozart by candlelight. But behind the public grumpiness was a sensitive soul haunted by loss. His mother died when he was 16. His father spiraled into alcoholism. He suffered repeated heartbreaks. He never married. And worst of all, for a composer, he began to lose his hearing in his late 20s. Historians still argue whether an autoimmune disorder, lead poisoning, or typhus caused the hearing loss, but the tragedy of it is undeniable. Imagine being one of the greatest composers the world has ever known, and slowly losing the ability to hear your own symphonies. But here's where Beethoven becomes almost mythic. Instead of giving up, he doubled down. He composed some of his greatest works, his late string quartets, the Missa Solemnis, the Ninth Symphony, when he was almost completely deaf. He heard them in his mind, on the page, through the vibrations of piano keys and his inner ear. You picture him hunched over sheets of manuscript paper, scribbling furiously, lip twitching, jaw clenched, not so much writing music as wrestling it into existence. One fringe biographer described him as a man at war with silence. That might sound dramatic. But then again, his life kind of was. Beethoven didn't write for easy listening. Even his softer pieces carry tension beneath their surface. There's always something simmering, like a tea kettle just before it whistles. And that's what made him perfect for the Voyager record. His music doesn't just represent culture, it represents resilience. Grit. The kind of stubborn brilliance that doesn't stop even when the lights go out. There's a story, possibly apocryphal, but perfect nonetheless, that at the premiere of the Ninth Symphony in 1824, Beethoven stood conducting, completely deaf, unable to hear the thunderous applause behind him. A soloist had to gently turn him around so he could see the ovation. Can you imagine? Hearing nothing but silence and seeing an entire hall on their feet, clapping for the sounds you can no longer hear. You hover next to Voyager and imagine Beethoven somehow watching from wherever composers go after death. What would he think of this tiny spacecraft with his name on it, drifting into forever? Would he be honored? Confused? Annoyed they didn't include more of his work? Probably all three. And here's a strange fact, Voyager won't reach the nearest star for another 40,000 years. By then, the languages we speak will be gone. Our cities will be dust. But Beethoven, well, his music will still be traveling. It's a humbling thought. His work, shaped by candlelight and illness and heartbreak, is now locked into a golden disc, shielded against cosmic rays, spinning slowly through space. No applause. No encore. Just silence. And yet, somehow, you feel like that's the right ending for him. Or maybe not an ending at all, just a new movement. A coda. One final fugue into the dark. You listen to his Fifth Symphony's slow second movement again, in your mind. The lilting rhythm, like footsteps pacing in a long corridor. Soft, sure, steady. The music doesn't ask for attention. It just continues, like breathing. And you wonder, maybe that's the real message Voyager sends. Not a greeting or a map. But a quiet resilience. A little song against the dark. Something that says, we were here. We heard beauty. And we sent it forward.